Hello, this is John Majori with Majori on Bowie. This is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I have a new interview every week that always has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog, www.majorionbowie.com, where I have new content every single day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. And if you are a regular visitor to the blog or a subscriber to this YouTube channel, you already know my guest today, Marc Lowe, a friend of the enterprise, so to speak. One of my favorite guests, which is why I keep inviting him back on the show. We have had many discussions. Marc is a multi-talented person, an American living in Japan. He is the cat from Japan. And he is an educator and a musician and a person who is deeply well-versed in David Bowie, all things David Bowie, from an understanding of his music to his lyrics. And he's got some interesting theories about what Bowie might have been up to, which is why I enjoy talking to Marc so much. So, Marc Lowe, thank you and welcome back.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to just sort of tease a couple things we're going to talk about. Marc has recently completed what he calls his triptych of complete albums that are inspired by and attributes to David Bowie's album One Outside. They are not cover albums per se, but they are influenced and inspired by One Outside. We're going to talk about that. And in between the last time Marc was on the show and today, he's exchanged with me several other covers that he's done of Bowie songs. And there tends to be a theme. And the theme is actually the topic of a course that he's teaching, a college level course in Japan this semester, which is Bowie and Dystopia. And I wanted to start, Marc, by just asking you, beyond the title that I just said, what's the course about? And, you and I have talked about this, but what's the connection, Bowie and Dystopia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge topic, and that is sort of the topic, I think, that is kind of going to be the frame, let's say, through which we, or whatever metaphor shall be used. Okay, the course, yes. I was going to say off the bat, it doesn't have a text, but it does have a text, actually, this time. I'm using Adam Steiner's book, Silhouettes and Shadows. And interestingly, and see, I'm starting from the back end already. I haven't even started. What's the course about? It's about dystopia. It's about Bowie. Why Scary Monsters. Why did I choose Steiner's book? I thought I should ground it in something and give the students a textbook, because my tendency is to not use any textbook and to just like talk or do. And I thought, well, maybe they would appreciate it. It's also a reading element, because the course, in fact, is in part a reading course. And I thought, well, we're going to be reading stuff. It's a reading and listening course, actually. And I designed it. I was doing this. Interesting. It's very different from the Bowie course I taught before, not only in theme, but the course itself is a reading and listening class. That's what it is. And for several years at the same university, on the same day, same time, I've taught this course as a news media course. Two things. So that was one thing. I started to feel literally that teaching it as news or whatever, like I couldn't even feel that I couldn't trust myself to trust the news, if that makes sense. And this goes into the whole disinformation, and if maybe we'll get into this in the AI, Ramona A. Stone became Ramona AI for a reason, the whole what's going on in the world now and how that connects to outside. I think that's coming later in our conversation, and how it appears in my triptych. But so okay, one thing was this, and I thought, maybe I should take a break from the news in this class. So when I was writing my syllabus for this class this year, I started to think in a different direction. So I took a step back and I thought, okay, we're living in a friggin' dystopia. And that's one of the reasons I don't feel I can even teach the course as a news course anymore, because everything is so, AI is coming and it's this and it's that. And who knows what the hell is real and not real anymore. You talk about AI and deep fake and all this stuff. Seeing is believing. Didn't we grow up with that, John, that expression? Is that true anymore? seeing is believing. I mean, like, Biden robbed the bank with the thing, and it was an AI made that video. I mean, it's like, of course, it's published as AI made the video, but like that's going in weird directions. And I get weird things on my Facebook news feed that's presented as news, and I think it's not news. I then started thinking, so we're living in this kind of quasi, or actually maybe actual dystopia, or what's becoming a kind of strange world, and stranger and stranger and stranger world. From my own work on Bowie, as I think you kind of alluded to, that there's a theme you found in my Bowie covers, probably in my own work too. You'll see it there, which is this, that things are kind of moving in the dark. We're living in the darkest of time, says the Minotaur. And so my Bowie and Dystopia course, I thought, well, if I'm not going to teach news, let's do it through like another window. Now, 1984 would be like an obvious choice as a literature teacher to teach as a dystopian thing, but that's UK, and this class is not a UK literature class. It's not even a literature class. So it's the reading and writing, or reading and listening class. I was doing media, so I thought, well, if I'm going to do listening and reading, sound and vision, not quite, but why don't I go, and I'm starting to just, think creatively in a sense. And I've taught a course on David Bowie. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Why not look at dystopia such as 1984, but not 1984 only, through another artist's eyes, or the lens of a thinker, an artist, in this case, a musician as well, an actor, a painter, and all those roles that Bowie had, and a fashion person and all that. So, but okay, so the course, the way that I've designed it or thought about it, so I'm using Steiner's book, is actually, I describe it this way. We have various stations that we're going to make pit stops at, but we have 3 main stations. So we're going station to station, you get it? Yes. So the first main station with some pit stops along the way will be Diamond Dogs and Hunger City. Yeah. The second station will be Scary Monsters and Super Creeps in 1980, which is a kind of moving from between Kether and Malkuth. You have other stations and other pit stops. We're moving between. Scary Monsters actually lies in, kind of is like a transition, or a norikae in Japanese, which is a transfer, right, to another or another train. And then outside, 1995. Now, this is the way that I've described it to the students, although we haven't even talked about any of it yet, because I've been making too many pit stops along the way to Ziggy Stardust Land and the world of the alien who falls, the savior who falls to save the world, only have 5 years until the apocalypse. And then he gets devoured by his own fans, and there's a whole fascist thing behind that character. But then I went back even this last week, I talked about Nietzsche, God is Dead, and the Superman, Übermensch. And I played the Superman from The Man Who Fell to the Man Who Sold the World.
Man Who Sold the World.
The Man Who Sold the World. And he also fell to Earth in 1976, and etc. But yes, so now, in fact, interestingly, next week, after this interview on Monday, I had my class on Monday, we're finally going to lodge for a few nights. Haha, lodger, get it? Yeah. The first major station will be Diamond Dogs and Hunger City. So, John, I recently watched your interview with Glenn Hendler in the 33 and the Third series. He did the Diamond Dog. And this was it's great, because this is like this kind of mutual thing that we learn from each other, don't we? In this kind of virtual community, in a sense, of Bowie ice, or however you want to say. Steiner's book cover, the literal book, is in my videos for Phantom in 2023 from the album Angels of Time, because I was reading it, and the video has me wearing a kimono jumping on the bed that I no longer have because I moved out and back in, and wearing a kimono, and I have his Silhouettes and Shadows book. I'm using that. That is the middle transition phase. But Diamond Dogs, the Hendler book is very useful because he talks about the fascism aspects of what and and Hunger City, of course, and some other things. And so I'm not, obviously, I didn't require that as our text, and I caught it after I started the course, but I read that. And next week, I'm actually going to share bits of that with the students, just like some quotes from it kind of thing. And I'm going to talk about Hunger City, Diamond Dogs, that aspect. Then we go to Scary Monsters, and finally Outside, which, of course, I'm kind of, I don't want to call myself an expert, pretty, deep into that world.
So you covered a span of Bowie's work. You mentioned you went as far back as 1970 with The Man Who Sold the World, and then as far ahead as 1995 with Outside.
I will, but not yet. We're not nearly ready for that yet. Yeah, but that'll be later.
So a little deviation from the course itself. Absolutely. I was, in preparation for this interview, I was sort of sketching out Bowie's major dystopian works, and I think the first song that he did that touches on this concept is a terrible song, and not one of my favorites, which is from the mid 60s or 1967 called "We Are Hungry Men." It's not a great song, but it shows even when he was very young, I think he was 20 or maybe 19 when he wrote the song, he's thinking about a dystopian world. And I would say after One Outside, and I'm interested in your opinion on this, that his, there's maybe dystopian elements of The Next Day and Blackstar, depending on how you interpret it. But really, his last dystopian album was Heathen. Do you agree with that? Like, if you think about it, begins with Sunday, nothing remains.
Heathen is absolutely, it is. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And the reason I say Heathen rather than The Next Day is somewhat like Scary Monsters. I think the package as a whole is a dystopian album, even though there's songs like Everyone Says Hi or Gemini Spacecraft, which really aren't. But the way the structure of the album in totality is really a vision of a dystopian world, but one that maybe he's not predicting, but one that he's describing.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, there's Slow Burn before that, and that happened. He wrote it before 9/11. He said, but there was something in the air. Didn't you sense it? Hello?
Yeah.
And then when it happened, they said, oh, you predicted it. He said, no, there's just a sense of tension everywhere. And then it happened. Like, who's so surprised? I mean, obviously, it was surprising. It was horrible. And Bowie was in New York when it happened. And he said, we're under attack, apparently. So, he had his ear to the future and his eyes open, so he could sense the heavy weight in the air. Now, that's what Adam Steiner talks about in the book, and how he felt in 1980 when he's doing Scary Monsters, and that's kind of. Let me just say something about Scary Monsters, then we'll jump forward to Heathen and beyond that, because I want to answer that by also saying that, like Bowie in 1980 was sensing that in the air. And I think the way that I was going to say this earlier, and now I'll say it now because it actually applies to your question now. The way I describe to students is the big major difference between the three major stops of the three albums, and of course, Station to Station. This morning I woke up and you're writing about the Thin White Duke, John. I read your thing. I was like, oh, nice synchronicity there again. Like we're talking about Bowie's flirtation with fascism in 1976. Perfect. And we're going to talk about dystopia today. So, again, all the connections of our Bowie community here. And by the way, I wasn't making light of that. I'm smiling and saying, isn't it funny? But I don't mean funny like ha ha ha. I mean, it's and it's like interesting, right? So no, it's wonderful. It really is. Steiner and all these guys that have come into my life as well, and we're all connected in various ways. So Scary Monsters and Steiner. Okay, the way I explained or described, I said, so we have Diamond Dogs is a fictitious dystopian world. It's based partially on Orwell's 1984, which Bowie obviously he wanted to do the Broadway or the off-Broadway or the on-stage version of this, the musical / whatever theatrical version. And Orwell's widow said, no, I don't want a cross-dressing pop star to do that. And then she regretted it when she heard Diamond Dogs because it's great. And so he created Hunger City in a way. Fortunately, that's the other half, right? So the A half is like Hunger City, Halloween Jack, it's another character and all that. And then you get the Big Brother and the dystopia of 1984 and Orwellian stuff on the B side. But that's a fictitious dystopia that's based in metaphor and, this kind of, I mean, that's what dystopian fiction is, right? We call dystopian fiction science fiction, not because there's a scientific element like space aliens and laser guns or lightsabers and use the force, Luke. Science fiction, there's no science in it, in that sense of science. But unless there's something like a brain patch, which becomes reality in the future, which hasn't happened yet, but it's happening now, not tomorrow or yesterday. So you see all these elements. Okay, let me finish.
So wait a minute. Mark, I have to stop you.
let me
but the brain patch, right? I mean, I know what you're referring to, but there's something in the album, and there's something in the world that we live in today that people watching this are not aware of either of those things. What are they? What's the connection?
I'd like to answer that after I finish this, and then I'll get back.
Okay,
That's a totally different thread that I want to get to. 1984 / Hunger City, which is Bowie's own created world. Let's jump to Outside. 1995 is also a created world based on a possible future, which goes to your question about brain patches, that actually Bowie mentions brain patches / soul brain patches in the Leon session. I think even in the shorter seg of Baby Grace Blue, she says, I've got a brain patch. So that is also a fictitious world that also is based on the world of today. Just as Orwell wrote 1984 based on the world of today in his day in the late 40s, what he was seeing, and just making it an extreme and fictionalizing it, but basically using metaphor and newspeak and all these things, which we're seeing right now happening in various ways in reality. Now, how is Scary Monsters different? When I talk to the students, and I'm using Steiner's book, that, like I say, is a norikae, using Japanese because my brain is half in Japan and more than half in Japan now. Norikae means to transfer. It's a transfer stop. Bowie was between the centuries, a millennial fetish. It wasn't yet a millennial fetish until 1995. He's going to do the end of the century. But before that, he was at the end of the 1970s, moving into the 1980s, before he comes back with Blonde Hair and Let's Dance and a new producer after John Lennon is shot and killed, which scared the hell out of him because he was next on the list during the Elephant Man performance. You know the story?
Yeah, I do.
I can tell it for the viewers later maybe, but there's so many things always. So 1980, Bowie is sitting there. I'm reading, from Steiner's book, right? I mean, actually, I learned a lot from his study of this period. I didn't know all these details before reading it, other than interviews and things. So, it's like Bowie was kind of paranoid that some great calamity was on the horizon. That's also slow burn, and then 9/11 happens, right? And so, the difference between our three major stops here: Diamond Dogs, Outside on the far ends of the bookshelf, 74 and 95, and then 1980, is that Scary Monsters is not a fictitious dystopian concept album with any kind of story or characters that run throughout. We have Halloween Jack going down Manhattan Chase, and we have fleas the size of rats sucking on rats the size of cats in the city, and we have this dystopian vision of this terrifying world. And then we have 1984 and Big Brother on side B of the album, if you had vinyl at that time, or the cassette, if you whatever later. But so Scary Monsters and Outside, of course, is a whole non-linear gothic hypercycle we talked about last time, drama, and we have characters. We have a detective, who killed Baby Grace Blue, and we have Ramona Ace on these other characters, and we have this fictitious world that's based on the world of 1993, 4, 5, right? And Bowie in an interview says it's the sound of 1995. It's not about the future. It's happening now, and now we have brain patches. We'll get back to that. 1980 is Bowie sitting there going, I won't use the F word so that Google doesn't flag it. I can use flag. That's an F word. Flag. Flag. Red flag. Beep, beep, beep. Morse code. Right. We just make our own language here. That's also maybe a new speak. Scary Monsters, Super Creeps. It's no game. And you mentioned this early song from the 60s, 67?
I think it's from 67.
How about
We Are Hungry Men?
How about I don't know why I'm tired of my life?
Yes. Yeah.
And
right.
That's the basis for It's No Game in 1980. He returns to this early song, which was more sort of like self-focused, young Bowie being depressed a little, like he lives above the grocery store, owned by an Austrian, and I can't speak because, right? And it's that kind of self-focused young man Bowie going back in 1980 and taking that melody and saying, it's no game.
Yeah.
It's to be insulted by these fascists is so degrading.
Yeah.
Broken fingers and stones smashed against the pavement and can I say that word? SHC on the walls. So there's no concept album there. I don't know if dystopia is the word. I think it's just, it's a dark vision of where the world is going in 1980. And that's what Steiner's book is about. And that's why I decided to use it as our pivot.
No, I would, just to jump in myself, I do think of Scary Monsters, which is actually, as much as I'm an enormous fan of One Outside, it's actually, Scary Monsters is actually my favorite Bowie album.
It's a lot of people's favorite Bowie album. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's a dystopian album. And I think the linchpin to that being the theme is Scream Like a Baby, where
my favorite song on the album. Scream Like a Baby is my favorite song. I haven't covered it, but
yeah. Well, hopefully it will. But it's, that song is just describing life within an oppressive state.
Yes.
And if you think about the characteristics of individuals who are being oppressed, at one point or another, Bowie embodied all of those characteristics.
Right.
And what sort of connects that to every other theme that he covered is the group versus the individual.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just, I want to hear you talk, but just I can't help myself but sort of inject.
Please.
Yeah. That I don't, Bowie was less political in the sense of who's running for office and what party's in control. And he's more an observer of the dynamic of the individual and the group. And if the group is the state trying to force conformity, and this appears time and time again, either in, there's songs off of Space Oddity, the album Space Oddity, that are about, a girlfriend who's rejecting him because he's not conformist enough. Right. And in Scary Monsters, you've got this song Scream Like a Baby, where now he's trying to be a part of society, right?
He can't say it. Yeah.
He can't say it, but it's being beaten into him. He's literally getting beaten, drugged, and everything else. It's Winston Smith in 1984 all over again.
And it's like Baby Grace Blue and the interest drugs, and the brain patches.
So if you're talking about, and I'll stop talking, but
No, keep going. Keep going.
You hit on 3 albums that have a connecting thread.
That's
Diamond Dogs,
that way.
Scary Monsters.
That's the idea behind my chorus. That's exactly, that's why those are the 3 main stops. But I also make the pit stops to talk about Nietzsche and got it very important.
Yeah.
Very important Nietzsche to David Bowie's world. And not just the Superman, but like throughout the whole thing. And actually that connects with Heathen. Because like Bowie around, Heathen is the perfect thing to go to, because you asked me about that and like you wanted to comment on, is that the last dystopian album? You asked was the original question. We haven't even gotten there yet, because this is how it happens when we get into this. And then I have like 10,000 other things off of what you've said that I want to say about those things, but there's not time. So, but there's so many things here, and it's so interesting and goes in right. So yes, firstly, what you're saying is fascinating and true, and it's got my brain firing in a million things I want to say, directions. But so let's just talk about Heathen for a moment, since that goes back to the initial question about Nietzsche. And Bowie talks about Nietzsche and the gay science and God is Dead in interview from 2002, around the time of Heathen. These are things in his mind, on his mind, he's thinking about. And, this one interview that I'm constantly quoting this, I actually literally sampled it and put it in one of my songs, where Bowie is talking about Nietzsche, talking about God is dead. What is that? That's post-enlightenment. The Enlightenment, science, reason, logic. We are now the gods, he says. And the best we could do as God was make the
people were so aggrandized with their own sense of science and the aftermath of the Enlightenment and how man himself could improve the world. Then, of course, it led to things like Nietzsche saying God is dead, and it led to Einstein's discovery that time and space aren't what we thought they were, and Freud an understanding of another kind of human inside the human. All these things culminated in the idea that everything we'd known before was wrong. Everything. So we start out the 20th century with this clean slate. We are now the gods. And the greatest thing that we could do as God during that century was create the bomb. That was what we were good at doing.
That's what Bowie says in this interview. And then, like, there's one edit where the person edited in, like, the bomb going off in Hiroshima, you know?
So, wait, you know, Mark, again, I have to stop you. So, we are the gods. You are referring to a different interview than what I was thinking of. What I was thinking of when you said that was something he said to the photographer, Mick Rock.
Yeah.
And he was talking about we being the rock stars of the new gods.
That's the 70s. This is 2002.
Yeah.
So you see how that, in the 70s, the rock stars were the new gods for Bowie.
Yeah.
And that was Ziggy Stardust was the embodiment of that, and teetering on the edge of that fascist, everyone wants to be a
right. Yes.
In Handel,
So
right? Everyone wants to be a fascist, right?
What he's observing is the relationship between the adoring audience and a rock star, a demagogue, a religious figure.
Yes.
And he sort of works through that, you know, after the Thin White Duke, you know, you read what I wrote today. After the Thin White people, you know, the wrong people were taking it seriously, he sort of abandons that, but he doesn't abandon the idea of dystopia or a world that has collapsed and where the populace has given over its agency to somebody else to make decisions for them to disastrous effect. So let me hand it back over to you.
I would even suggest, this is going on another thread, unfortunately, but then I want to get back to Thin White Duke for a second. Well, let me say Thin White Duke, that the hellacious comment, I don't think you mentioned in your essay today, you talked about many of these things, but that Hitler was the first rock star.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now that's it. That's it right there. He's like, you get it? This is what a particular person is doing now in a particular country that has been overrun by mindless bots, or I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
All right, let me go back.
I'll tell you, Mark,
oh, wait a minute. You're wearing an orange shirt. Is that subliminal?
No.
Okay, so then we all got the reference, or some of us did, and we'll get to brain patches too. There's another one. So, okay, but I was going to make another comment that even in the 80s, you said he didn't abandon the idea of dystopia. How could he, when the world is just going darker and darker and darker until 2016? Blackstar would be a dystopia if it wasn't maybe so much about his own struggle individually with the Black Star.
Right. So, I mean, not to go down another thread, but you mentioned
when you see the Black Star, your time's come, says Elvis, and they were born the same day. Right? So, Heathen, I want to say one thing, and then I'll let you talk. The one song, you know what I think is the most dystopian song on Heathen is not Sunday or Heathen the Rays. They're dark. Those bookends are really dark. And then you have, like you say, tributes like the Gemini spacecraft. Thank you for an influence for Ziggy Stardust. And I know you didn't get credit. And so, like, here's a little bit of my paycheck for you to be able to eat or something. So, I mean, Bowie's very nice to do this, right? This is like part of the thing, right? He was trying to, and he did a lot of he did 3 covers on that album, right? And he took off some of the longer, darker tracks that were on the single later, right? Anyway, so the track that I think about is I Demand a Better Future.
Yeah.
Or I'll stop loving you, God. Stop making this friggin' horrible, because I have a daughter and I want her to grow up happy and healthy and not live in a friggin' dark dystopian world after I'm gone. I demand a better future. And of course, who is David Bowie the man, or the David Jones the man, to demand of God a better future? But this is the whole thing behind that. And that to me is he's saying, the world is just getting darker and darker and darker and darker. And how can you do this? I have a daughter now and I love her so much. And I demand a better future, or I will stop loving you, wanting you, praying to you, and God is dead.
Yeah.
And let me stop there to let you talk. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. So that's a good point.
Yeah. You had mentioned the 80s, and, he didn't abandon dystopia in the 80s.
He didn't.
An album as seemingly for mass consumption as Never Let Me Down.
Yes.
Has songs on it. Right.
I know.
Right.
It's dark stuff. It's totally dark.
Yes. From songs like Day In, Day Out, which is he's a really grimy, gritty reality, to Time Will Crawl.
Time Will Crawl is my favorite song on that album. Time Will Crawl, I think, is brilliant, actually.
It really is.
I love that song, actually. That's the one song from that album I really, really like.
Yeah, the more time I've spent thinking about a seemingly absurd song, Glass Spider, it's really, it frames this dark vision of searching for water, which he explores later in reality.
Water,
right? Around science fiction. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Gone, water's all gone. Might come back, water's all gone.
Yeah.
And then he keeps using water as a metaphor for death, right?
Yeah.
If your mother won't love you, the riverbed might. That's a line in
Buy some drugs and watch a band, and then we'll jump in the river holding hands.
So it's like even then, and when he's trying to make the most mass music for mass consumption, he's still dealing with this vision of a nightmare world. Right? He doesn't give it up.
Yes, he can't give it up. He can't give it up.
Right, he can't. So I was going to ask you, but you already answered.
Even when he's trying to appease his label, EMI, I guess, at the time, and even when he's trying to appease the fans that were getting his, what he calls his Phil Collins audience that he didn't feel comfortable with increasingly, which is finally he smashes and destroys the Glass Spider, as the saying goes, after the tour, and says enough and does Tin Machine. He's still in there with the grit and the grime and Time Will Crawl, as you say, and in the Zeidwin province was this Glass Spider with the tears of glass or whatever it is, and that's very dark stuff.
Yeah.
But the stage show is all, when they're hitting balloons with the things, but also, in a way, we're getting totally off topic with all this stuff. It's interesting because this is how the.
I mean to bring us right back to topic.
No. I kind of think this is fun because normally we wouldn't be talking about. We've never talked about Never Let Me Down before. I think it's interesting that we're doing, or Heathen like in this much depth. I think it's interesting because actually, it's not like I can only talk about Outside or Dystopia or whatever. This is like actually part of the whole thing. So, and Loving the Alien, which I think is one of the best songs he did in the 1980s period. That's one of my favorite songs from the 1980s. And Tonight is my most loathsome 1980s album. I hate that album. I think Never Let Me Down is way better. So much better. People say Never Let Me Down is his worst album. I would go, not to war, okay? I'm not going to fight with anyone. Yeah. But I would just, there's no way, to my mind, Tonight is by far the worst thing he ever, the duet with Tina Turner is miserable, and the reggae songs, it's just not even David Bowie. But okay, that's my opinion. But Loving the Alien.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think it's probably the best, like I say, my favorite song of the entire 80s output, but I hate the album. That one song redeems the whole thing. Thinking of a different time, Palestine a modern problem, bounty and your wealthy land. There's terror in a desolate land, watching them come and go. Tomorrows and the yesterdays, those Christians and the unbelievers, hanging by the cross and hello. But if you pray, all your sins are put upon the sky. Pray and the heathen lie will disappear. they'll disappear. But that's all dark stuff. And the themes and the lyrics and the videos.
Yes.
From the 80s, Video Killed the Radio Star 80s, where Bowie actually becomes very much like a pioneer also in video and music video, MTV. The first major exposure to Bowie I had was Let's Dance, and I didn't even like it and think about it until the end of the 80s, Tin Machine, and then catch on to the Ryko disc collection to the 70s, and I was like, wow, this guy was amazing. Who is, Robert Fripp actually got me into Bowie because I was a King Crimson fan and I heard Heroes and Scary Monsters. So I kind of came in through that back doorway, but like my first thing was, 1980, Let's Dance, and then I look at the video now and there are people in the sweatshops and there's a nuclear bomb going off in the background. The Aboriginal people are sort of, sweatshop to buy the red slippers in the window. They're all shiny and nice. They put them on and looks what happens. And that goes back to what you said, the collective and the right, and also race, black tie, white noise. We could talk about race and all of it. It's all connected.
So let's bring it. So I want to bring it now to your work, the triptych, and I think there's something that came up a little bit earlier that is a connecting thread, which is we keep sort of mentioning the brain patches. What is it?
I noticed you got that.
What is it?
I caught on that.
So what is it in one outside, and then what is it in reality, and then what is your triptych? Why did you decide to do that now?
Okay. Well, firstly, I can't give everything away. So I don't want to just say, this is what it is, and okay, you don't have to watch the rest of the interview now because you got the punchline. I will talk about it in less cryptic terms eventually, but what I want to say first to preface it without going for 2 hours to preface it, hopefully I'll try not to, but let me start with the beginning of the triptych. I have been talking about this recently in my own little write-ups, which I've done several on my blog, on Bandcamp, on YouTube even. I think I have one that talks about this, but we've never talked about it on our talks. So the triptych actually began before the triptych began. What is this? Are you doing the Sphinx again? No, I'm going to explain this. The triptych before the triptych, the version, the version of Minotaur's Lair.
Yeah.
It actually wrote, if you will, composed and recorded in 2022, the summer. Lost in the Minotaur's Lair was released on September 25th, 1995. No, September 25th, 2003, for the anniversary, 48 years of Outside, which was released on September 25th, 1995.
For we're living in the safety zone. Don't be holding back from me. We're living from hour to hour down here, but we'll take things when we can. It's a kind of living that recognizes the death of the orderless man, where nothing's vanity, nothing's too soon. It's not Eden, but it's no sham.
Yeah. Interestingly, I completed the trilogy this year. It's now 30 years, 3 years later. Bowie had planned a triptych, as you know, a trilogy, Outside, number 1, 2, Contamination, 3, Afrikaans, to end in 1999, be published the last day of 1999, moving into 2000, the new millennium, as he said. Although the new millennium, I guess, is actually 2001. But we had that whole thing about fear of blackouts and the internet and stuff, which never happened. part of the whole thing too. Okay, so firstly, let me say this. I'm trying to keep this really, organized here. This might answer without going off too much on tangents. Summer of 2022, I had this idea for a long time, like I did with Blackstar, to do a tribute, solely a tribute focused on One Outside, because it's my favorite Bowie album, my favorite Bowie period, and also the Leon Sessions, which we have talked about several times. So if anyone who's watching this does not know what are the Leon Sessions, I would advise them to kind of go and watch even the short intro video we did like for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Leon Sessions, and if they're interested, they can kind of follow that path. So Leon, anyway, I mean, in short, it's 1994, the sessions leading up to Outside. They're more improvisational, longer suites of 20 minutes or so each, with a lot of improvs, and a lot of the characters from the Outside saga were created during those sessions. That's the short answer, and the rest we talked more in the other talks. So my idea was to do something kind of like Leon suites, as a tribute to Outside, which was to make these kind of suites with seg-like bits with character voices. And the first character I thought of was the Minotaur, because the Minotaur is kind of, in a way, at the very center of the Outside story, and yet the Minotaur has no voice. The Minotaur is a kind of symbol of the artist. It's artist Minotaur, literally, in Bowie's version. My version, by the way, is reversed. It's Minotaur/artist. I don't know how many people have picked up on that. Mine is Minotaur artist, and if you look at his, it's artist Minotaur. That's intentional. So
I never picked up on that.
Yeah, there are little things. I can't give everything away, but I'll give a few hints. There are lots of, what do they call them? Easter eggs. All my stuff is just nobody pays it much. Not nobody, you're paying, and others, some do. Very few people are going to be paying that much attention, which is fine. It's for 100 years later when the aliens come and find my data somewhere. So my music and my message. All the voices that you hear on Minotaur's Lair, which is 17 minutes, that track, which is the center of Lost in the Minotaur's Lair, the album I published September 25th, 2023, were originally from 2022. It's almost interesting. This was not planned. It's almost like the Baby Grace seg from Leon was shortened and then put on Outside, right? Mine was like an opposite pattern. The short version was 2022, and in 2023, I extended it to 17 minutes. I went in the opposite direction as Bowie. Bowie took the Leon Sessions and tidied it for the label. I made a kind of a UR, like a in Japanese, kari, like I'll make a demo in a way, not a demo. It exists and it works as its own piece, but this is the start of it, and I'm going to do something with this like next week. But next week never came. Where the F did Monday go? Because my desktop computer crashed. Literally, this is the story behind this. But I was lucky. I had saved the Minotaur artist seg, not only the MP3 or the WAV file to have the file, but the original Logic file, so I could do something with it and mix it again. I was very lucky, but I kind of left it behind because the computer crashed. I had to work through that. I got a new computer, finally, the computer I'm using now, and then I did in 2023, John, I turned 50 that year. I did a trilogy. That was my year of triptychs, actually. Funny, because I didn't do the Bowie triptych. The Bowie triptych took 3 years, which is odd for me. Usually I do everything boom, boom, boom. I did literally back-to-back triptychs that year, but original work. And then I did this track for This Dark Shroud. Oh, Ramona, Where's the Future Gone? I was improvising, and I was like, oh, Ramona, where has the future gone? And I kind of went into these dystopian dark themes, and I was looking at the news, feeling like Bowie in 1980, the way that Steiner describes him. Some calamity is coming. We've got Ukraine, we've got nuclear threats. And I go, you know what? I got to get back to that Outside project.
We seem to be lost in the labyrinth, the maze. It was the Minotaur did it.
Brain patches were created in 2022. The Minotaur speaks in 2022.
Was Elias Mouse based on the character that he seems to be aligned with He was.
And so do the brain patches. Absolutely. 100% in 2022. I said the minute this character who could be Nathan Adler Jr. or one of his friends is how he described it. He goes, I met Ramona downtown Shibuya, I think it was. I'm saying my own lyrics, and this was improvised in 2022. Shibuya is the heart of Tokyo. When you see those crazy crowded streets with the flashing Blade Runner thing, that's Shibuya. That's the place in Tokyo. Downtown Shibuya, I think it was. It was at some freak show, some carnival.
Her name was Ramona. I met her at some freak show, some carnival. Downtown Shibuya, I think it was. She was convinced that World War III was upon us. Elias Mouse and all of his devious doings. They would be required for all of us. Brain patches. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
It's only five tracks, and it's 40 minutes. It's the shortest of the triptych that I made. And the last track is Strangers When We Improv. I thought, I want to do one more track. Outside ends with Strangers When We Meet. Why don't I do a kind of loose piano vocal version? So it's 5 tracks, 40 minutes, and I just whoosh, got it out by September 25th. That was the end of that for me at that time. I figured I might do some more covers eventually. The second one, which you interviewed me on earlier this year, which I released this year but recorded in 2024, all of it, started, actually, I did Hello Space Boy, which you remember the Election Day version, which was a remix of my own version of that.
Right.
Which is really noisy and chaotic. I went into the studio and played live drums because I wanted the pounding live drums. I'm a drummer. I didn't want to do electronic drums as the main. I actually added them, but it's mainly like there's live drumming on that track. I ended up putting my version of Hello Space Boy on my original album, The Tower, as bookends, 2 versions of that. So I didn't put it on. But the track that your voice is on at the opening of Some Kind of Future 2.0, actually the backing is based on the backing I created for that. But then I remixed it and added stuff, and I took the vocals out, so it doesn't have the Hello Space Boy vocal in it. But the Hello Space Boy track I didn't put on the album. The Enemy Within, I called my version, and it has reference to the enemy is fragile, and also the enemy is within. Because
doesn't that go ahead?
What do you think? It's not. I'm being the quiz question. A, B, C, D.
Yeah,
no,
I thought it traced back to Stalin.
Ah, who else said it in more recent days? Very recent days. Wow, I mean, Trump says it all the time. But and at the time that I recorded that in the summer, in the news, he was saying, "We have to look at the enemy within, the Democrats, Biden, Biden people. We have to go after them." And like you say, now we're talking about the whole theme of this talk, in a way, dystopia / the F word. And I don't mean the 4-letter F word. I mean the longer one. So that was that. But also Bowie has The Enemy is Fragile and Leon, which I wanted to cover. So when I was walking around the streets improving, and I was really thinking I'm going to do a cover, my own version of The Enemy is Fragile, because I like that piece. And I started, again, riffing, kind of like what I did with Strangers When We Improv, and it became the enemy within, the enemy is fragile, the enemy is always here, he's within, and So, and then it became sort of like very political, and it became Now, Not Tomorrow. And I think to jump forward again to this year's There Is No Hell, the way that started and ended up being a triptych trilogy, even I hadn't even planned until this year to make it a trilogy. This just happened, man. I swear. I was at home one night and I was sort of riffing on the piano and I was like, oh, I could make this into a kind of abstract version of Small Plot of Land. And that became Small Plot of Land, and I just had it as a separate track. And then I got really this bug to do outside the song because I went to, on YouTube, I think I shared this with you, there was like a bizarre, scary AI-generated version. Someone had posted the music to Bowie's original Outside, the original soundtrack. This would be flagged by YouTube. But the video is AI, and it's scary as hell. They beat on the outside shows like through a stained window, people beating up others like the you know, like the Gestapo's come, you know, and it's got these weird like quasi Bowie-esque, sort of looks like Bowie, but sort of looks like an alien. It's like those weird, scary AI versions of people's faces when you see they're half animated. It's really scary. You see him standing in the street with like a hat on, and he's like a dark shadow, and there's this light, and it just looks really dystopian and scary. I looked at the Motel the other night. This is just another non sequitur or a seg, and the Motel version with the AI was like even maybe scarier than Outside. The AI, it was like the Motel is going up in flames, me exploding you. They show this woman in flames. I mean, it's terrifying. But anyway, this is how the AI interprets Outside songs, John. It's scary. And I go, okay, what was happening at the precise moment when I found this Outside song version, not the Motel, which I saw the other day, and it was where they beat on the outside and they're beating people up, and I thought, this is where Trump is in office, Doge is gutting Social Security, etc. These young kids are in there taking our data and so on. It was at this moment, and people are planning to riot outside the Capitol building and protest. And if you listen to my version of Outside in the lyrics, it's now not tomorrow, tomorrow's too late. And at the end, it's happening outside. And then the last line is the Capitol building.
Now, Elon, he jumps up on the stage with a crisp chainsaw, slashes around, cutting his ego on everything.
Hello, Leon. Hello. Elias.
Welcome back. You diamonds.
Because that's what was literally happening. And when I looked at AI, it was like prescient. Like the AI was saying, you know, the future is happening now, and that's going to be rioting and chaos and violence and social unrest and a kind of resurgence of fascism. And I had done a bunch of other covers around that time of other artists. I did 9 Inch Nails' In This Twilight, which is also from an album that's basically dystopian, called Year Zero, that he wrote in protest to what was happening with Bush Jr. after 9/11. And it was a protest album against all that stuff. And like, we're going to destroy ourselves, man, kind of album. And he did a song called In This Twilight, which is very much this, you know, ashes in your hair remind me. Like we're in a post-dystopian world at the end because everything just blows. So I was doing other songs by other artists that had a dystopian feel to them. And I was going to put the 2 Bowie songs along with those and just have an album. But then, John, you know, this happened. I don't remember exactly. I think I got the bug to do the Motel suddenly, and not because of the AI video, which I saw after. And so then I did my version of the Motel, which I think you've seen and heard by now. You have, because you've heard the whole album.
Yeah.
And I did a video for that too. I recorded it. And then I was like, you know what? This is This is the next. This is another piece of this outside thing. I'm not done yet. I have something more to say, and I got to do this.
Bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure we handle them well. We've built a lot of complex
John is in America, no checks out the wheel.
We're all kind of,
No one needs anything, they don't even just pretend.
shit is okay. And it's time for people to wake up. And I've used a metaphor for the middle, but maybe...
John is in America.
The enemy is fragile, the enemy within. It was a full moon night. If you look at the video, there's a full moon behind me. And the moon kind of sort of plays a role in some of the lyrics, and I filmed the moon. This year, the same thing. I was walking outside. It was a full moon night, John. I swear to God, the full moon's in the video, if you look at it. And I started riffing. But this time, you think you picked up on this when you did your cover of the week. It was actually somewhere between the first one I did outdoors, which was an outside medley, and the second one I did outdoors, which was not so much the songs from outside, but more just sort of riffing. So I did literally like pieces of songs, like fairly large chunks of I'm Deranged, No Control, Heart's Filthy Lesson, etc., etc. Strangers When We Meet It opens with.
But so let me just mention the two albums that we're going to talk about today. Some Kind of Future 2.0, which is, I would not characterize it exactly as a cover of Outside. And I'm going to say Outside rather than One Outside, just to, just for simplicity's sake. But the formal name of the album is One Outside.
Oh, my violence,
Touch on
raining
a
tears
prior album
on the
that's related
sheets.
called Lost in the Minotaur's Lair. So, Mark, Some Kind of Future 2.0, it's not exactly a cover as I mentioned. So let me sort of ask you broadly, what is the album?
Strangers when we meet, strangers when we meet, strangers when we meet.
And that I then broke into 3 parts, right? This time I had the soundtrack already because I'd been in the studio, did this long improv, was perfect. When I put them together, it was magic. I was going to record a whole new backing for that. It was magic because it was instrumental to begin with. It fit perfectly. Boom, I've got it. I mixed it. Part 1, 2, 3, the motel, outside, small plot of land. I had done all those. And then I added the segs. And the major seg is the Minotaur coming back 2.0 and saying, remember what I said 3 years ago about Elias Mouse? Remember what I said 3 years ago about brain patches? Remember what Ramona said about World War III, on the brink of World War III? Remember the darkest of times? Here we are in 2025. It's also 30 years anniversary of Outside. And I have something left to say, and I'm going to say it. And the Minotaur makes this fine. And by the way, I used the exact same voice effector. I went back to the original file and I put my voice back in so the effector would be the same exact voice as I had used in 2022. If I hadn't saved that file, John, when my computer crashed, the triptych probably never would have been.
Something is going to be horrid.
My name is Minotaur. And it's 2025. Years have passed since I first spoke out. And now it seems the end of the road has drawn close. indeed living in the darkest of times. And indeed, my predictions about Elias Mouse in 2022 and his brain patches and us developing new homelands, as David Bowie before me had called them as well. Unfortunately, you see, my sense of what was to come was rather accurate. Bon anniversaire, one outside. Rest in peace, David. I hope you're resting in peace. April 12th, 2025. Full